Speaker, my first question to the Prime Minister and no answer given. I asked what proposals have been put to the European Union. We asked yesterday, many colleagues asked, and the Prime Minister seems utterly incapable of answering. Any rational human being would assume, therefore, none have been put, and there is no answer to that question. The Prime Minister and his Cabinet colleagues have been saying he's making progress. The EU's chief negotiator, the Chancellor of Germany, the Taoiseach of Ireland say no proposals have yet been made by the UK. If the Prime Minister thinks he's made progress, will he publish those proposals that he's put forward to replace the backstop?
Prime Minister!
As the right honourable gentleman knows very well, you don't negotiate in public, and we are making substantial progress, and we will get that backstop out.
Order, Prime Minister, please forgive me interrupting. There is a long way to go. There are a lot of questions to be reached. The questions must be heard, and the responses from the Prime Minister must and will be heard. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let us be absolutely clear. This government is going to get a deal from our friends in Brussels, and we will get the backstop out. We will get an agreement. I think this House can approve. The only thing that's standing in our way is the undermining of those negotiations by this surrender bill, which would lead to more dither and delay. We delayed in March, we delayed in April, and now he wants to delay again for absolutely no purpose whatever. What does he intend by this? We are spending, in this government, we're spending £1 billion to put 20,000 more police officers on the streets. He wants to spend £1 billion a month net to keep us in the EU beyond October the 31st, and I will never allow that.
Mr. Speaker, I really fail to see how I can be accused of undermining negotiations, because no negotiations are taking place. He's been Prime Minister for 6 weeks and he promised to get Brexit sorted. In 6 weeks, he's presented nothing to change the previous Prime Minister's deal, which he twice voted against. These negotiations that he talks about are a sham. All he's doing is running down the clock. At the weekend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster said food prices will go up under no deal. Will the Prime Minister publish the Yellowhammer documents so that people can see which food prices will go up and by how much?
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster said absolutely no such thing. I can tell him the preparations for no deal, thanks to his good offices and thanks to his efforts, are very far advanced. But I tell you, the surest way of getting no deal is to undermine this country's ability to negotiate, which is what he is doing. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that if this bill is passed this afternoon, I don't want an election. I don't think he wants an election. But there's a petition on his own Labour. There's a petition on his own Labour website with 57,000 people, including Carol, Nigel, Graham, and Phoebe, calling for an election. I don't know whether there's a Jeremy on the list. But, Mr. Speaker, I know he's worried about free trade deals with America, but there's only one chlorinated chicken that I can see in this House, and he's on that bench. Will he confirm again? Will he confirm that he will let the people decide? Let the people decide on what he is doing to this country's negotiating position by having a general election on October the 15th.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Well, maybe the Prime Minister could tell us what the negotiating position actually is. And since the question I asked, the Prime Minister may have forgotten it in his rather lengthy peroration there, that the British Retail Consortium said, and I quote, that it was categorically untrue when the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster denied there would be shortages of fresh food. Mr. Speaker, I hope no more young female staff are going to be frog-marched out of Downing Street. Because there was another government leak at the weekend concerning, Mr. Speaker, there was another government leak at the weekend concerning disruption of our ports. The leaked documents written by the government in the last fortnight show no deal would lead to shortages on the shelves and of medical supplies in hospitals. People need to prepare. So can I ask the Prime Minister again, will he publish in full the Yellowhammer documents so people can see which foodstuffs are not going to be available, which medicines are not going to be supplied, and what will happen to the shortages of vital supplies in every one of our hospitals all over this country?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid that the Right Honourable Gentleman is guilty of the most shameless scaremongering. We have made ample preparations for coming out of the EU. What his party is recommending is yet
Order! It's order! It's very difficult to hear the responses from the Prime Minister. Members must calm themselves. There is a long way to go. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what he is recommending is yet more dither, yet more delay, yet more uncertainty for business. What we in this government want to do is deliver on the mandate of the people. Now, he used to be a Democrat. He used to believe in upholding the referendum result. Can he say now whether he would vote in favour of leave or remain? And can he say now whether he's in favour of a second referendum or not?
Enemy go over.
The Prime Minister failed to answer my questions about food supply, about medicine supplies, and about the problems in hospitals. He refuses to publish the Yellowhammer documents, and he talks about scaremongering. Where does the information come from other than his office in his government? And he's obviously so confident of the position he's adopted, he's now prepared to spend £100 million of our money on an advertising campaign in order to try to persuade people that everything's fine. He knows it's not, they know it's not, he is hiding the facts. The government has refused to publish its impact assessments on how a no-deal Brexit would affect poverty levels in this country. They received a request under the Freedom of Information Act from the Glasgow-based Poverty Alliance. The DWP replied that the public interest would not be served by that disclosure. Will the Prime Minister publish that analysis? If he won't, what has he got to hide?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Right Honourable Member, who would squander £1 billion a month of taxpayers' money on staying pointlessly in the EU, this government is getting on with running a sound economy so that the poorest people in our country are seeing increases in their wages for the first time in more than a decade. And I'm proud to say that those on the living wage, Mr. Speaker, are now taking £4,500 more home every year than they were in 2010, thanks to this Conservative government.
Speaker, you don't have to go very far from the portals of this House to see real destitution. People begging and sleeping on the streets. Child poverty is up since 2010. Pensioner poverty is up. In-work poverty is up. And he won't give us any of the information of the assessments of increased poverty that could come from his government's proposal. We are less than 60 days away from leaving the EU with no deal. The Prime Minister has had 2 days in office before the summer recess and then planned to prorogue Parliament. Yesterday, he lost one vote, his first vote in Parliament. He now wants to dissolve Parliament. He's desperate, absolutely desperate, to avoid scrutiny. In his third day in office, our after 5 questions from me, we haven't had an answer to any of them. I can see why he's desperate to avoid scrutiny. He has no plan to get a new deal, no plan, no authority, and no majority. Mr. Speaker.
Order. If we have to go on longer because people sitting on the Treasury bench are yelling to try to disrupt, so be it, we'll go on longer. Some people used to believe in good behaviour. I believe in good behaviour on both sides of the House. It had better happen or it will take a whole lot longer. Very simple, very clear. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister does to the country what he's done to his party in the past 24 hours, I think a lot of people have a great deal to fear from his incompetence, his vacillation and his refusal to publish known facts that are known to him about the effects of a no-deal Brexit.
Boris Johnson, I'd rather be dead in a ditch than delay Brexit. Let's fact check that. Really, this liar and charlatan, he won his Uxbridge seat. He became an MP, he fought an entire election on a single issue. So you know what it was? Stop Heathrow third runway. And he said words similar to this. I'd lie down in front of the bulldozers, he said, to save my constituents. When the vote came, there was a voting, but you know what he did? He ran away. What? He literally fled the country. Boris Johnson, he's as dead as a dodo in a ditch. He's a dead ditch dodo. He lost 23 MPs this week, expelled them from a party. It's chaos. He's the gaff spaffer. Yesterday someone said to him, please leave my town. Lost every single vote in Parliament this week. It's an historic record of failure. He's a loser. You're supposed to be in Brussels negotiating, someone said to him in the street. We are negotiating. And what came next destroyed him better than any journalist. You're not. You're in Morley, in Leeds. Did you see? No, PM defiant as brother walks out. Look at me, defiant. What, acting like a moron in Morley is the new defiant? Watching a female police cadet collapse and carry on dribbling. That's the new defiant. Did you see it? He watched her collapse and then just carried on turned around, turned his back on her and carried. What kind of person would do that? Look, even his own family don't trust him. He's a liar. He lied to the Queen about proroguing Parliament, sacked from the Times for lying, sacked from government for lying about an affair, £350 million bust. Look at the state of him, he's a mess. Him and Jacob Rees-Mogg, the surrender monkeys, begging Corbyn for an election. Stop humiliating yourself. Get up on your knees. No one trusts you. You're a dead ditch dodo. Your entire political career is a lie. Look at him. The dead ditch.
George Orwell wrote 1984 in 1948. And by reversing the last 2 digits of that year, arrived at the year in which to set his nightmare vision of a world run by the totalitarian state. Orwell was of a generation of socialists who had believed in the Russian Revolution and had gone to fight for socialism in the Spanish Civil War, and was, like others, vastly disillusioned when word of Stalin's barbarity began to leak to the West. Though 1984 is a denunciation of Stalinism, and of Stalin's treatment of truth, that by controlling men's minds, the party controlled the truth, it is also a warning to the rest of the world that it is possible to dehumanize man completely, and yet for life to go on. In a society that builds machines which act like men, and creates men who act like machines, it is possible that you, too, may come to love Big Brother. And now, 1984.
It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansion, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with it. The hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mat. At one end of it, a colored poster, too large for indoor display, had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a meter wide. The face of a man of about 45, with a heavy black mustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying to lift. Even at the best of times, it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39 and had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. Big Brother is watching you, the caption beneath it ran. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque like a dulled mirror which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. Winston turned a switch and the voice sank somewhat, though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagerness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls which were the uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades, and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold.
I think that when we talk about race, we tend to focus on individual acts of prejudice, which is why UKIP often come up, because they'll overtly say stuff that we find offensive. Unfortunately, the issue of race, if we understand it, is a lot more insidious, and it takes a lot more of a historical view to understand the difference between individual bias and structural racism and privilege. And the idea of Great Britain was intimately tied to the fact that Britain's invaded almost every country on the earth, literally. No, literally, there's a map, you can Google it. And so the idea of our greatness was intimately tied to this idea of empire, which was intimately tied to what Rudyard Kipling calls the white man's burden, to go and civilize all these stupid brown folks that have been writing and having civilizations for thousands of years. But let's forget all of that. And so if we fast forward to today, when we talk about structural racism in Britain, do we have the same institutional disparities in rates of imprisonment that they have in America? Yes, absolutely we do. Do we have the same disparities in terms of who's dying in police custody? Yes, indeed we do. In 2011, we were told we loved Libyans so much we wanted to bomb democracy into them. Less than 5 years later, we're leaving people fleeing the same conflict to drown in the sea, while giving a woman space in a national newspaper to refer to them as cockroaches. And when you refer to humans as cockroaches, that is a mandate for murder. Let's be clear about that. The moment human beings become non-human, that is a mandate for murder, and there's a long historical parallel with that. Today, Germany, the country that bombed this country, you know, in our grandparents' lifetimes, so theoretically the grandchildren of Nazis can get in and out of England easier than the grandchildren of people from the Commonwealth who fought against the Nazis. And where do they come from? When we talk about immigrants, do we mean people from Australia and New Zealand? Didn't Boris Johnson go to Australia and say, hey, we're culturally the same? Was he talking about the Aborigines when he said that?
We call them expats.
Right. White people have such a different way of classifying themselves that white immigrants are expats and non-white immigrants are immigrants. So when we say immigrants, if we go to border control, we can go there, Yarlswood, and we go and look at who's there. It's not a bunch of white people from New Zealand. So we have structural forms of privilege and bias that are much more insidious and much more difficult to overcome. The reaction to Africans and Asians coming here post-World War II, to rebuild the country after the Queen's German cousins bombed it, the reaction to them was one of general hatred. It's illogical. These people who had formerly been colonized by Britain had fought in both world wars. India gave 2.5 million volunteers, for those who don't know. When we talk about being saved by America in the war, we want to talk about being saved by India and Russia. That would be a bit more accurate. But that's a bit inconvenient. But the reaction to those people and their descendants has been one that is about structural bias and privilege. The greatest metaphor for this might be Canary Wharf and Tower Hamlets. If you look at that predominantly Bengali community that has to look at Canary Wharf every day, how many of those people work in Canary Wharf other than to clean toilets?
I only got into that through grime. So the first thing, I'm listening to grime records and they're all rapping about E14.
Yeah.
And I'm going, where's that? And I'm like, Canary Wharf?
Yeah, they're definitely not rapping about Canary. I suppose what I'm saying is not about saying that there's bias and bigotry everywhere in the world. The country my grandparents come from, it's pretty much generally accepted that they don't like gay people. But what's interesting, race even plays a role in that. In Jamaica, we have disgraceful homophobia. No one ever says it's because of Christian fundamentalism. Because even though it is justified in explicitly Christian fundamentalist terms, because only Muslims do bad stuff because of their religion. Because we know almost all the Muslims in the world are brown. Whereas when a German wings pilot crashes and kills 150 people deliberately, or the man in Norway killed nearly 90 people. I was in Australia when that happened. This is how uniform the agreement is that white people will be portrayed differently. The Australian media referred to Andres Breivik as having terrorist-like tactics.
Yeah.
I mean, to think about that. Yeah. This guy killed almost 100 people, and he's just almost a terrorist.
And he'd written a crazy thing about Muslims.
No, it's very clear. I mean, he was a terrorist by any standard. The idea that white is right isn't just a European idea. It's an idea that has had insidious implications, because no matter what, the 700 people that were left to drown off the coast of the Mediterranean, were they white human beings, they wouldn't have been left to drown. And they certainly wouldn't be called cockroaches.
Well,
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Since I come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like the dress. I want you to come on over and stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Valerie, Valerie, Valerie. Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale. Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. Hope you'll find the right man who'll fix it for you. Are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. And are you busy? And did you have to pay that fine? that you were dodging all the time. Are you still dizzy? Since I come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like the dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Oh, why don't you come on over, Valerie? Oh, Valerie. 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 Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things what you doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Since I come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Oh, why don't you come on over, Valerie?